Well, morning, Daryl. I'm listening to your ranting and raving this morning. Your video. Let's put you on pause here. It's about 2:18 in the morning Pacific Standard Time. It's June 13th, 2023 for a Tuesday morning. Yeah, I'm still waking up the zombie from Rosamond, California, sleep deprived and emotionally screwed up. Or is that sleep screwed up and emotionally deprived? I don't know. I'm usually getting confused this early in the morning. But yeah, when I saw your particular video and I was thinking to myself, okay, get to it, get to it, get to it, and then you mentioned it, I'm like, okay, finally you saw something about it. Because I didn't know anything what the hell was going on over at Walt Disney World unless if somebody else is posting it on YouTube, then they'll have to backtrack that information to see what the hell is going on. I'm like, okay, this ought to be interesting. Let's see, enough jobs over into Walt Disney World. Not exactly protesting Walt Disney World, but everything else that it stood for and everything else that Ron DeSantis stands for. And then why not? I mean, hell, he's turning his whole damn state into his own police state in the first place. I mean, that's what he does. He does. And we've seen this before, Daryl. I mean, come on. You had to have seen this for the last several years. You had to have. Charleston, was it South Carolina that they had protesting going on? When we had the old gas bag 45 in office? And he calls them, well, there ought to be good people on both sides. Man, and you'd seen the videos on this one, but actually I'd seen when the news media was doing the broadcasting on this damn thing, and I'd seen this. I'm like, oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph. It's like watching Skokie, Illinois all over again. Now, back in the 70s, we had this thing happening out in Skokie, Illinois, and this is the reason why I keep bringing it up left and right because it actually happened. Somebody made a docu series about it. Martin Sheen, no, 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 no. Martin Landau was playing a community leader and going through the court systems, trying to prevent the American Nazi Party from marching in his Jewish community area just because they wanted to be a bunch of royal pain in the butts. I want to try to keep this video as almost as technically clean as possible. However, every time I keep doing it, my mouth gets in the way. So I don't apologize for my language, but apparently the zeros and ones don't like it that way. But if you read the court cases on this one, if you'd seen the movie somehow, you'd realize what was at stake. Some people are looking at it at the racial tendencies of what they're doing. Yes. And believe me, coming out of their mouth is pure sewage. That's all it is sewage. And we can't stand it, and it cannot be done, right? And the problem is, we still have the First Amendment rights. And that was being tested back in the 70s on this one. The American Nazi Party versus, I think, Skokie, Illinois, or something like that, going through all the way through the lower courts to the appellate, and then finally landing itself into the Supreme Court at the time. And they had to make a ruling on something here. They had to make a ruling about the First Amendment rights, if I remember correctly on this one. Because even a hate group under the Constitution of the United States, under the First Amendment, regardless of how much we hate this trap here, but it's there. They were ruled that they were within their constitutional rights to protest. Now, it's one thing protesting a government, because you're protesting a government of any sort, from the local over to the federal. Okay, no issue on that one. But they do take issue when it comes down for protesting a personal person there, because then it may be considered harassment. But they didn't have the, if I'm hoping I remember this correctly, that they didn't have the uh, laws in effect that prevented people from using their hate on anybody else. This was way back in the 70s on this one, early to mid 70s. I remember watching this thing, and I was looking at it and watching it, and just couldn't even figure out what the hell am I watching here. But it was important for me to watch it anyway. It was like watching the docu series, which was actually a 5-part miniseries of a novel that could have happened. I mean, it sounded to me like it did happen, but it was basically the imaginations of Alex Haley, and he was talking about a story of a black family split apart and suffering through racism, and the ancestors are being brought over to America on the slavery ships, and how they had to deal and struggle with, and not to mention the roots to the next generation, had to show racism. I never heard of it, seen it when I was a young kid. This is like Sociology 101 happening here. This is like something we had to understand. Now, if I had personally had gone through experiences during that time before I'd seen those shows, I probably would have had a different opinion about it. But I had an open mind because I didn't understand what the hell was going on until I experienced it myself, and then I really understand what the hatred was all about. Fear, control, power, misunderstandings. They don't get it, they don't want to get it, but they want to spread their damn stuff over to people left and right. No matter how much you can give them knowledge of who and what they are and try to explain their culture, some people just don't want to get it because it shocks the living crap out of them because of their own upbringing. One way or another, somewhere they actually had something that scared the living crap out of them, that made them afraid of what it was. And for me, yeah, and I had experienced it the rotten way, and I had to learn what it was to understand lesbianism. But back then, when I was a kid, I had also learned what racism was all about, not through television or movies, per se. Experienced it personally at this point. Moved from one particular neighborhood of San Fernando Valley. And in the San Fernando Valley, there are areas that certain people would live in because of rent, but also because of involuntary segregation, not ruled by governments or anything else like that, but by themselves. Little neighborhoods. It's like going in a Miami and seeing you got little Cuba there. Well, we had, if you want to say it, little Latina or the other various ethnic groups that we had in the San Fernando Valley in different sections, including Little Armenia out in Glendale. Certain areas that would have black areas and Latina. Here there was from South America all the way through Mexico. There was still, to me, Latina. They were still speaking different various dialects of Spanish, but they were still Latina. And I will get the cultural reference screwed up on this one here. They're celebrating like little Mexico in San Fernando. You had some blacks in there, but the rest of it are all Spanish descendant immigrants, or just people who were there as California was growing. Multiple generations who didn't exactly want to learn English and stuck with their Spanish heritage. And that's what California was all about. I mean, it was a heritage that we were learning. I mean, California was still part of Mexico a long time ago before we decided to have a split off of their own state, and in that process joined up with the Union, the United States. And we were an empire, or actually, basically an empire one time. That's why we had a star in our flag. Getting on with it, it's important to understand culture. It's important to understand where you're coming from, but also where you're living in. You see the culture around you. You see the multi-ethnics around you, regardless of who and what or where your ancestry came from. In certain areas, that it did matter because children didn't understand, didn't care. They were just going to insult and use their own power because they think they're cute. Terrorize the living crap out of you and beat the crap out of you because they think they can. And they did that. Moved from one section of San Fernando Valley in North Hollywood that actually did value culture. And you go into a subdivision where some of that culture in an elementary school is mostly black and Latina. And I think I've talked about this one in my many videos. And being one of those rare token white boys in elementary school, yeah. If I had learned what the Spanish language was during that time, I think I really would be going into more and more fights with these kids because they weren't nice. I survived 2.5 years of grade school, including and during that time, a car accident as well. Long stories in my other videos concerning about that situation. But concerning about the people that I dealt with, I had met some people that were actually nice and kind, and became, for a long while, extended family. These days, I don't know what the hell's going on with them anymore. They lose a matriarch and everything else goes hell in a handbasket and everybody falls apart. I talked about these ones a long time ago too, probably buried in my wind files somewhere in there. But I know what racism is. I see it, experienced it. Hell, I see it over here all the damn time. In my own little neighborhood of Roseman. You want to talk about ethnicities, it's mostly white. You have some blacks coming in. You have blacks living out here, but mostly whites. And some of the older folk, yeah, they actually had racism happening in this town as well. And it's slight, and it's still there in this town. Oh, they'll deal with the blacks. The thing is, not many of them actually have employment out here. You'll have black students in in the schools, but you'll still have the segregation going on, their own involuntary segregation. Out here in this neighborhood, out here to live in, on the outskirts of the air base and the town, you still have your segregation over here, even though you don't see it, and don't you're not seeing it. I had seen it because I experienced it for the last several years since living in this apartment complex. But you happen to treat some of the people rotten, and you get it returned. Or if you get treated rotten, it's kind of hard not to return it in full on that one. But I also learned that if you have patience, love, and tolerance, one way or another, you actually do get good neighbors out of this place. Some are just pain in the asses, that's all. But others are pretty damn decent people anyway. And that's, if I tolerate them, and I do tolerate a lot of them, and I get along with them, then I got no issues and no beef. I stay and tend to my own business. Sometimes it hurts and sometimes it doesn't hurt. Now, getting back to what was going on, what I was saying about Charleston. During the time of the orange gas bag, we had the Charleston situation happening. We had the white supremacists going out there screaming and yelling their damn heads off left and right, and they're being racial thugs left and right, saying Jews will not replace us. Sometimes I thought I was hearing "you will not replace us," but that was actually it was Jews, and they're very open about their damn racism. Show their racism on their damn face. Show them wear their true masks. So why wasn't I not surprised concerning about Walt Disney World having this kind of stuff over here? It's like seeing a knee-jerk reaction. All I can do is just sigh and just say, this is what the people have put up with in the state of Florida. If they really, really wanted to get rid of Ron DeSantis, they would have done so already. But apparently they're so damn thick-skinned and blind to it and deaf to it and mute to it that they accepted it. And yes, it is like looking back in 1930s what happened to one particular country who started to accept that more and more, and hearing someone else's explanation saying, here's your problem. Let's jump on them. Let's be a little ungracious to them. Yeah, we've had this all along. We got social media blowing things not out of proportion, but make us more and more acutely aware what the hell we are. Well, we've had this thing going on for a long time. We just had the news stories buried here and there, unless they got themselves big enough in a group or somebody actually responded to it and put them on the pages or on the networks. But for the most part, shove the dirt, shove the dirt, shove the dirt, put it underneath the carpet. And that's it. It's still there, crawling around like a vast of cockroaches, multiplying, feeding upon itself. That's all we got is cockroaches left and right. We got people mutated into cockroaches with their hate and their vitriol and their disgusting thing left and right. And studying human history, we've had this all along. We've had these viewpoints for long periods of time. So to me, it's unfortunately it's part of our negative nature that we have. We grew up with it from generation to generation to generation. Some people fought like hell to make sure that it didn't happen. The problem is it was still happening. Even World War II, we called it the greatest generation at that point over here. It was still suffering through its racism. Red tails, that they called them back in the European theater, and actually in the Mediterranean theater, and going through all the way up until Germany, you had a group of black pilot aces out there. And these guys were taught the basics and they had the instincts. And they were protecting they were protecting our squadrons and doing the right bombing runs and fighter protection, but they were still segregated. You think these guys would have been able to be used out in the Pacific theater, but they were used in the European theater. The Japanese captured, or actually the loyal Japanese Americans, ones that are descended as the first generation, fought in the European nation, in the European theater. As I was reading more and more about it, the Germans they used in the Pacific, ones that were loyal. Some used as translators for Europe, but they had to fight in the Japanese. They had to fight against the Japanese at this point. So there was balancing acts happening in World War II on this. While Hitler was also solely intent on trying just to satisfy his fear and paranoia, Trump was doing the same damn thing. He had fear, he had paranoia, and he really didn't give a hoot. He still doesn't. And now everything else is coming up to bite him in the butt on this one. And everything that he spawned is having detrimental effects everywhere. Those who followed him, who believed in him, they're seeing how justice is trying to take over and take control and wrestle it back from the Trumplicans and the maggots out there. And if I happen to see a protesting group with Ron DeSantis' face on there, and he's got the red, white, and the picture of Ron DeSantis, that'd be accurate right there. I mean, already he hates things left and right because he's doing it for political reasons, and also he's a power-hungry little little Fuhrer there. I'm going to call him that because basically he's treating his state like that, going against civil rights and going against the Constitution. And again, as I said before, and I'll say it again, the people went along with it, just like they did in Nazi Germany back in the 1930s to 40s. And then they had the excuse. But I didn't know. I didn't smell I didn't smell it anywhere. I didn't see it. I didn't hear about it. Excuse. Yeah, so this is the land that we have here. We have no accountability, transparency, or responsibility. Hell, we don't give a shit about you. We only give a shit about our own damn thing. Well, so much for language-free video. But that's what we're dealing with. Why wasn't I surprised concerning about Walt Disney World, and why am I not freaking out about it? Because I should be outraged. I should be outraged. I should be saying I'm doing a war on this damn thing, and I'm saying this, and I'm thinking, humanity doesn't know his ass about hard rock. It doesn't. It wants what it wants, and it doesn't care who and what they do it against. It doesn't matter how many times we, as creators, doesn't mean on video exactly, but in anything we do, to share our thoughts and feelings in forms of literacy, of films, of television, books, magazines, poems, stories. We're experiencing and we're telling people what's going on, and people fail to learn from each other and be ignorant and listen to morning to you too. It's way too damn early in the morning for this stuff. But this is what's happening. I'll probably do another video at this point over here before I hit the sack. So this is part one.